Welcome to How It Works with Holger. In recent weeks, I've done a lot of web design, and I got some feedback from developers that are still focused on the VCL, and they would like some How It Works for the VCL. So today, this will be VCL focused, but also web focused, because what I would like to show you today is that if you do web development, you can integrate your web applications or your web components into your existing VCL applications. In the last long video series, we created an image gallery. This is exactly the web application that we built. We even deployed it on the web, different URL, but that doesn't matter here in this case. The thing is that I also said you might be able to integrate this into your applications, because wouldn't it be cool if you had a VCL application and could show your images this way, or you could select images from an API this way, or even better, assume you have a product API or something similar and you want to make a selection and you already have the web technology in place, but still have some parts in the VCL and want to make the selection in the web application and then transfer the information into your VCL application because you have there some additional reporting or data mining with grids, because those are the strong points of a Windows desktop application compared to a web application. So there's many possible scenarios here. So in the end, we will build something like this. This is a VCL application, and inside of the VCL application, I simply created a browser control. And the cool thing is you do not even need a web server for this. This is fully integrated into your executable, so to speak. The executable is even able to host your web application, or I shouldn't say web application, your web parts. And this is done with technology that is included in the Microsoft Edge browser control. So if you can't use Microsoft Edge and this technology, you still can use this with a regular web server that you run inside of your VCL application. However, the clear advantage of this solution is it won't interfere with any malware checks or Windows Defender, for example, because this web part is simply hosted inside of your application. There is no server running per se. And the cool thing is, if you don't want to use this technology, you can still create a web server inside of your VCL application, for example, using TMS Sparkle, and you can use the same benefits. The benefit is as follows. You have your search example here. This is the very same application that we built in the last video series. And for example, let's click the popular videos, and I say, oh, I like this one. I click on it, and boom, I open another VCL form. And here I'm using the imaging component library with a toolbar, and now I can edit this photo inside of my VCL application. And of course, it doesn't have to be an image. As I said, it can only be data, like user information, user ID. You select something from a web portal, and then you process that information in your VCL application. But this is a great example for the Paxels API control if you want to edit or change or modify images that you have there. So now I could use one of their tools here. For example, I could use these filter controls here and resize, pixelize the image, or use one of the convert to grayscale and then save it in one of the picture formats that they offer. So there is a lot of possibilities here that you can do. So you can also use this to select images for other purposes. So this is a universal approach to exchange data between a web application and a VCL control. Let me also emphasize that this web application works like before. You can page through it. So this browser really hosts the full application with all the API functionality. The only thing we need to do is we need to create a hook that allows us to basically trigger something. If the user clicks on this, the web application needs to send some information to the underlying VCL application. I almost said web application. So the web application needs to send information to the VCL application. And we're not going to build this from scratch because typing the code takes quite some time. The source code will be made available for both products because here the project group contains both the web project and the VCL project. Let us start with the modifications to the web project. And formally, TMS calls the interaction between VCL and web the bridge, the web bridge. And this is something TMS has introduced not that recently, actually years ago. However, with TMS Web Core now in play, you can really reap the benefits of this solution. Let me also emphasize, if you're not using TMS Web Core for certain parts of your web solutions, this will still be possible. Let's say you have an external application created in React or Next.js, and you want to take information from that information into your VCL application. That is also possible. You will see very shortly that the additions that you need to make to the web application can be universally applied. It doesn't matter what web framework you use because it's just a snippet of JavaScript code. So let's flip over to the web application. And just as a short repetition, we had the main form, we had the image gallery component, we added pagination, we had the interaction with the Pexels API, and we also had the Pexels key, my personal favorite, that I always need to blur out of the videos, but we need a key to access the API. So this application only needs very little adjustments. First, and again, the placement of this lies in your control. You can also very much add this to any of the forms. Here, I decided to add it to the global index HTML so that we have the functionality on all the forms of the application. Okay, if you just want to have this bridge functionality on certain forms or in certain parts of the application, do not add it into the project HTML file. Add it to the page when you render the page or when you render the content that is supposed to support this functionality. However, my advice is add it to the index or the project HTML file. This looks more or less like the template created by TMS Web Core, but here is an additional script that we needed to add. And this implements a function, the send message function. And the JavaScript used here is very, I don't want to say ancient, but it has maximum compatibility. For example, when I refreshed my JavaScript knowledge or when I learned JavaScript in depth for the first time, I never learned this syntax. So here you see that we define a function and we name it send message, and the var declares it globally in the whole application. And that is usually something nowadays we don't even do in JavaScript anymore. We have let and const. Var is something that was mightily abused, I might say, with JavaScript development, that you declared your variables with too grand a scope. But for this, it's ideal because send message is the function that we can call in order to send a message to our VCL application. And what is the message? Well, this is the beauty of JavaScript. It's not typed. So in this case, I always use a string, and the string usually contains a JSON string that I can then in the VCL application interpret as JSON and then have a wonderful object with multiple properties. However, in this case, we don't even need to make it this complicated. The only thing we need to know when the user selects an image, what is the URL of the original image, right? Because if you click on the image, we should know what the URL of that image is. So we add this script to the index HTML file. That means we can call send message from anywhere. But this is the only but that we have to mention. This is JavaScript, of course. We can call this from TMS Web Core, but I advise you to use it either inside of your HTML controls, or you will need one of these code snippets that I do not like that much, but we will have to call directly JavaScript with an ASM block. In this case, in order to call send message, we need to call it when the image is selected. So we go into our image gallery component, and just as a reminder, we iterate over all the images using the JSON object that is returned from the Pexels API. And the only thing we need to add is that we add to the link, which we now flip over to a div. When we built this, we used a link, an A element, to go to the Pexels API or to the actual Pexels page. You can still see this if I open up my original example and I click here, it opens up the original Pexels page. So if we look in the developer console, click here, we see that what we generated was actually the up here. There it is. And sorry, this is very, very difficult to hit because my mouse wheel always scrolls a couple of times. So here is the element A, and that contains the H reference to the page here with the image and all that kind of stuff. So instead of that, we want to generate a div now, and this div, when we click on it, that means we click anywhere in this area, we want to send the URL of the full image to our VCL application. And we can do that pretty easily. You might not think it's that easy, but it is. So the link now is a div, not an A, and instead of href, we set the attribute onClick. It's really that simple, because for HTML, it really doesn't matter. You know, if it is an event that we call, a function that we call, it's the same thing. So we set the attribute onClick, which is triggered when we click on the element, and then we simply, and this is looking a little bit naughty in code, but here we have the double quotes, you know, send message, double quotes, and then we send the string image original, which is the original URL of the image. That's all we do. So if you were to run this, which we'll do right now, without the VCL, nothing would happen, okay? That's the beauty of it. Oh, let me cancel this, because right now I'm in the release configuration, so this gets obfuscated, and that's not what I would like. I would like to have the configuration set to debug right here. And let's start it again so we can see what is going on. We don't want any obfuscated code. So here, this is the application I built. Let's type in the text, search. And if we look now, what the console looks, looking at the element right here, we see that instead of the A, we now have a div, and on click, we call send message with the URL of the image, and that holds true for all of them. See, this then here has the URL for that image. Perfect. That's all we need. The only thing you need to remember is if you integrate this send message, it refers to something that is only there if you host your web application in this browser control from TMS. So I might talk to TMS that they integrate a little bit different code here. We simply assume that window.chrome.webview exists, right? We assume that this exists and access it right here. So that sadly is not the case, because if we click on something now, we get a red error that host objects is not available, and that triggers an exception. So this triggers an exception right here that is being accessed. So this code could be adjusted a little bit more so that it is made robust for the fact that you use it outside of the Chrome browser inside of your VCL application. That is possible, but this particular example is written in a way to keep it short. We don't want to overburden you with all the eventualities. So this snippet here will suffice to interact with your VCL application. So flipping over to the VCL application, it's really, really simple. And I wouldn't say this if that weren't the case. And the first thing is you need to set up your application a certain way that your VCL application has access to the web application. So you need to take the web application, the produced web application. I'm going here to show in Explorer and go to the bin directory. And in the bin directory, I created a web directory right here. And this is where I inserted or pasted or whatever you want to call it, copied into the deployed image gallery Paxels X application. That's the deployed web application. By the way, you don't have to do it this way. You could deploy this to a normal web server. You don't have to use this local approach, but that's the beauty of it. We will end up with an executable, and this executable will load these files. Obviously, you could also bundle your web application as a resource into your executable, extract it, and then run it. So there's multiple ways to do this. You do not need to leave your application around like I do here. I just wanted to be very, very visual what's going on. So in the binary directory where our executable is created, we have a subfolder called web with the web application with an entry point of index.html. Okay? That's the key thing. So with that in mind, we go to project options of the VCL application, and we go to compiler options. And there I selected for the debug configuration. Actually, I flipped it for all configurations that the output directory is the bin directory. So everything lands in the same directory in bin. And in bin, I then created the web directory with our application. The nice thing is that with modern Delphi, we can get these directories pretty easily. And that's literally what I'll do first. So if I look at the form right here, when the form gets created, I can get the directory for a web application by getting tpath get app path, get application path. And that is included in IOUtils, and ppath is actually a record. And these are I would almost say class methods, which they are, by the way. They're called formally class methods right here, class function and class procedures. But the problem is that this is not really a class. If you look up here, you can see that if I keep going up here, tpath is actually record. It's beautiful with regards to memory management and stuff. So in this case, we use tpath combine, and we combine the application path with web, and that's how we can get the directory where our web application resides. I created a tweb app loader class. If you look at the blog from TMS, they have this as an example where all the code is in the same method. They have detailed explanations, and I'll point you to that right now. Right here, it was posted on March 21st, how to set up a virtual hosting environment in Delphi. And they host one of their web applications or web pages right here. They built the Delphi quiz, I think. And these are all the steps that you need to take. For this application, I bundled all this source code, all this cryptic stuff into a class. And I called this class Web App Loader. And what I did here as well is I also abstracted from the fact that you need to know when the browser control is initialized, and you need to know when a message from the web application is received. Those are the two things that are a little bit tricky. So let me start with a main form, what it looks like. On the form, we have one single control. And that most likely is going to be different in your applications because you are going to have some sort of VCL controls, and then the web part allows you to do a selection, or, and this is something I have not mentioned yet, but obviously that's possible too, you can also send information from your VCL application to the web application in order to present it there. Example for that is if you want to visualize data with a certain web control that you have, or if you want to use a web library to achieve certain things in order to visualize your data or display your data inside of a web application that you have created. So that direction is available as well. Going from here though, with this control, the FNC Edge web browser, and it has to be the Edge web browser, okay? Because we need the functionality of that. And I really didn't do much here. I simply named the browser. I set it to AL client, and I said basically not to align with margins so that it takes up the whole form. The form I switched to sizable tool window, and that's it. Nothing more. And the code then does nothing else but to initialize this web app loader, which I'm going to explain in detail now. The application loader is the class that facilitates the hosting of your web application inside of the browser control from a directory, and it also sends you the messages that it receives from the web application. So in a nutshell, if you want to build something similar, use this T-Web app loader and don't start from scratch. You can use this. You won't need anything more. This is pretty flexible. Of course, I also integrated the web bridge. I called it TMyWeb Bridge, or to be honest, an engineer from TMS called it TMyWeb Bridge, because some things I can't figure out by myself. And I basically, when I was pointed to this, I said to the TMS team, how is this possible? And they pointed me to the web bridge, which is also available in the demos. Still, they pointed me to the right code snippets. So thank you very much for that. So I was able to build this great video. So this bridge is actually built as an interface, and it allows you to get messages and send messages. And here, I only implemented the way from the browser control to the VCL application. And without going into much detail, what we have to do to get this working, the most important thing is that to this web loader, we need to pass a couple of things. First, the browser control. That's the thing that's on our form. We need a host name, and we need a directory. The host name is something you can make up, to be blunt. It just has to be something that you don't use on your machine already, okay? And the directory is the directory that is supposed to be hosted as an application. And that's it. So when we create this control, I check if the browser control, we assign it, and if it's assigned, meaning we assign a browser control that actually is this, I hook up to the onInitialized event. So the T-Web app loader gets notified when the browser control is initialized. That's very, very important, because you can't just do something. It's true for anything with TMS Web Core, with TMS controls that are based on the browser control. For example, FNC maps is the same way. You have to wait for this control to be initialized. And you find this if you go to the events onInitialized. So for our app loader to know when this browser, when it's being loaded, the form is shown, when it's being initialized, or has been initialized, I should say, then we want to be notified. So we assign to the onInitialized method of the browser control our own method. And that's the method in this web app loader class. And what we want to do then is the snippet that you find in the block entry from TMS. We hook up the application in our directory and load it into the control. So here, for example, you see that we navigate to the host name that we set up with the index.html. The index.html is hard-coded. If you wanted to use something else, either replace it or also add something like a start document or something like that, instead of just having a host name, for example. This is pure magic from TMS. Plain and simple. This is what basically starts up a virtual server inside of a folder in order to host a web application inside of a folder on your computer. Plain and simple. That's how I take it. That's how I read it. I haven't gone deeper than that. Then from there, we can say basically add the bridge. Again, as we use the browser control, this is functionality that TMS provides for us. So TMS added the functionality to the VCL so that we can use this functionality. This is not something that you can use with any other browser control this way. Okay, so this is specific for the TMS browser control, that you add a bridge and we name it Web Bridge. And this name is very, very important. Why? Because if we go back to the index.html, go into the code, we see that we named it Web Bridge. And if you look at the examples from TMS that they have written for the FNC examples, they keep this flexible. But because our web application uses Web Bridge, we have to use the same name in our VCL application. That's how they know each other. If you want to use multiple bridges, which is also possible because you might consider sending multiple pieces of information on different bridges, even though I would argue you can use the same bridge, just coding your information differently in strings, you would simply name them differently. That would also be possible. So this is the bridge named Web Bridge, and we link it to FBridge. What is FBridge? FBridge is an instance of TMyWebBridge, which is a field inside of our app loader class, meaning we create it when the app loader is being created and we destroy it when the app loader is destroyed. Actually, if you look closely right here, and I love this when this happens when I record a video, but I'm just so honest that I leave it in because I want to show you that if you do programming and mistakes happen, right? And even though I have in my application the report memory leaks on shutdown, this thing wasn't basically recognized, But obviously I create the bridge. Let's look here. Yeah, I don't need to free the bridge. Why? Because it's an interface. Always, always watch out for what you have to free and what you don't have to free. The browser control is being passed by reference from the main form. We don't need to free that. And these are all strings. And the bridge, we don't need to free it because it's an interface. So it's actually correct. The destroy is empty. We wouldn't even have to define it. I could take it out. I just had it as a placeholder in case we ever define any additional fields. Okay, so the bridge is there, going back to what happens after initialization. And the bridge has a couple of things we need to implement. One of them is what happens if we get an object message or set object message. And I found this a little bit confusing, but set object message is actually when the web application sends something to the VCL application. I guess when TMS implemented this, they had to look from one side, right? So set object message sets a value in your VCL application. That's how you have to think about it. And the value is this value, this string is actually what you send in from the TMS Web Core application in this case. And what I do here with the component that I've written, I simply call onMessage. And onMessage, if we look here, is an event inside of the bridge, and I receive that in my app loader. If you think this is too complicated because I have two levels in there, the comfort, you will see this if you just look at the form, because right now I'm explaining you how the gears and everything fit together. If you use this, you won't need to know the web app loader and the my web bridge in detail. I'm just giving you the details right here. But if you use it, you just need to add a couple of lines to your form and you're ready to go. But I want you to be able to understand what's going on here. So the bridge, when there comes in a message from the web application, triggers onMessage, and that goes on here and passes it on using doMessage to the form. And this is the only thing you will have to implement if you want to use this. You need to add a reference to the web app loader to your form. You need an onMessage procedure, which receives the message from the web application, which is a string. And in onMessage, you then need to process the message and extract the information. In this case, it's really, really simple because the message is the URL of the image. So we can simply say select image. We pass the message over, that is the URL. And then it created a selection form, tform selection.viewImage. We'll look at this now. But just to sum up, if you want to add this functionality to one of your forms, the only thing you need to do, you need to basically pass the directory and a host name to this web app loader. And you need to hook up the onMessage event so that you get notified when a message is received from the web application. And then this message, you can do whatever you want with it. You know, you can open another form, you can just store it in a database, the information, because it is also possible that instead of sending the URL of the image, you could also pass the image itself in base64, for example, or as a data URL. The possibilities are endless, okay? So this is just one example where we pass the URL of the image. So we say select image, and we pass this into tform selection view image. And form selection is a form. Again, I picked, I think, sizable tool window. I love sizable tool windows, I guess. And in there, I have two controls. One is the image en view, which gives me this view. And the other one up here is a toolbar, which gives me all the different filters, all the image editing for rotation, cropping, and all that kind of stuff out of the box. So you literally just drop these two controls on the form, and you have basically a very professional photo editor inside of your application. And it also shows, that's why I'm doing these things, that TMS functionality works perfectly with other third-party controls. They're not doing anything that would prevent you from using Imagine, which is providing you with image editing, filtering, and other capabilities that is not covered by TMS controls. But you're able to use TMS technologies to get you there faster. You know, this allows you to provide to the imaging component right here to load an image from a URL. And this is how we define the view image method. We define it as a class procedure. And then inside of the class procedure, we create the form. Yes, think about it. We create tform selection inside of tform selection view image, because view image is a class procedure. So you can use the type name tform selection dot view image in order to call this. And in there, you create an instance of tform selection. I know it is difficult if you've never used it before. However, the global variable that you usually find here, which usually it says like var form selection, I think. I always remove it. I don't even remember. Is tform selection, I think, right? So basically, we always have a global variable declaration in here. And if you read the latest publications from Marco Cantu, who is the product manager of Delphi, he recommends you the first thing you do if you create a new form, remove this, okay? And then this class procedure is literally a very, very comfortable way, if it's a modal dialog, to deal with it. So in here, we say we want to view the image under this URL. We create the form, no ownership. So we do try finally free it when the dialog is closed. And in there, we simply say view. That's this thing here, view. And it has a property IO, and IO has load from URL. So Imagine is also very comfortable loading graphic files. And the file formats are plenty. In my latest book, I mention all the file formats that are available with Imagine. I also use it for the example that I created in my modern software development with Delphi book. I mention how you can load different file formats in here. So you don't have to pay attention if it's a JPEG, a PNG, Photoshop, everything supported, especially the file formats that are used by pixels are supported. So you don't need to worry about it. The only thing you need to do is you call load from URL, and the image will appear. It will automatically be scaled because I also set a couple of properties, if I remember correctly. I think you can say something like center right here. And then also, I think, what was the other one that I used? Basically that it is centered and stretched, I think it was stretched or something. Auto stretch, that's the one that I used. So that way the image automatically is fully shown inside of the area. And I also enabled the rulers, I think. Rulers, show rulers. I'm going to get rid of those. Okay, like this. Don't think the rulers are too good looking. So if we start this now and get an error, I broke it. No, because it's still started. So start it again. That's the whole application. I mean, there is nothing more because the web application gets loaded. And then if I enter something and search, I get images. I can resize this. And again, the responsiveness of the web application now really pays off, right? That we have the different grid levels and sizes. And next here, next. So let's, for example, take this image. We click on it, gets sent over to the Delphi application, and then I can edit it in here. I can do stuff like lasso effect. I can, for example, cut it out like this. Wonderful. Cut it. And there you go. So a full-sized image editor inside of your VCL application with image information supplied by a web application that you wrote yourself in TMS Web Core, which receives the images from an API, in this case, the Pexels API. I think this is a wonderful example how you can use web technologies in your VCL applications and stay ahead of the curve, because you still can use your VCL Windows desktop clients for stuff that just works better on the desktop, and you can supply some of the information. Even if you already need web applications for certain parts, you can supply those and integrate those into your existing VCL applications to basically make them better. This, of course, is an example that I don't know how useful it is that you have the ability to pick images from Pexels. I don't know if you, for example, think of a journaling application that you want to write your journals and you have a database in Delphi and you want to be able to supply images and you store your images, for example, in Google Photos. You integrate the Google Photos API into your web application, and then this is a wonderful example how you can link the two together. Hopefully you like it as much as I do, that you are now able to integrate web applications into the VCL. Please give us a thumbs up if you like this, and stay tuned for more, because there's plenty of more that TMS has to offer in the world of VCL and the web.